The air in Silent Hollow tasted like damp earth and forgotten secrets. They said it was just a town, nestled deep in the Oregon woods, beautiful in a lonely, isolated way. Pine trees reaching toward the sky, mist clinging to the valleys. But beneath the beauty lay silence and something else, something that remembered things the living tried to forget. 20 years ago, people started disappearing here, one by one. No trace, no bodies, just gone. The official reports whispered of accidents, maybe a transient threat passing through. But the locals knew. They knew the woods held a different kind of mystery. My name's Ethan Hayes. I came to Silent Hollow, chasing a ghost from my own past. My younger sister Sarah, she was one of the lost, vanished from our yard, just a few miles outside this town, 2 decades ago, never found. I came here as a journalist, ostensibly to write a cold case feature, to finally give a voice to the missing. But mostly, I came for answers. For Sarah, I thought I was ready to unearth the dark truth. I wasn't ready for the truth to know my name before I even knocked on the first door. This isn't just a true crime story. It started that way. It became something else, something that crawls out of the oldest parts of the world. This is what happened when I went looking for the people who vanished. This is the story of Silent Hollow, and what the pines remember. Before we dive into the heart of the hollow, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Your support helps us bring these stories to light. Now, let's begin. My car rolled to a stop outside the only motel in Silent Hollow, the Hollow Inn. It looked exactly like the photos online. Weathered wood, a fading sign, a porch swing creaking in the still air, nestled right at the edge of where the few scattered houses gave way to the imposing, dark wall of the forest. The motel lobby was small and dim. It smelled of old coffee and dust. An elderly woman emerged from a doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. Her face was weathered, her eyes tired and cautious. This was Agnes, the owner. "Help you, son?" she asked. Her voice was raspy. "Yes, ma'am. Ethan Hayes. I booked a room online for a week." She peered at the screen on her counter. Her eyes lingered on my name for a beat too long. "Hayes," she murmured. Not a question, a recognition. My stomach tightened. "Just visiting?" she asked, her gaze sharp now. I hesitated. "Research for a story." She didn't ask what kind of story. She just nodded slowly. Her gaze flickered toward the windows, toward the trees. "Silent Hollow ain't got many stories folks like telling," she said. She handed me a key. "Room 3, ground floor, end of the hall. Don't wander out after dark, son, especially not toward the woods." "Why not?" I asked. A shadow crossed her face. "The woods got their own rules, older than ours." As I took the key, I noticed a small framed photograph on the counter. A group of youngsters playing, laughing. It looked old, maybe 25, 30 years. My eyes scanned the faces. In the back, a smaller girl with bright, wide eyes. It looked like Sarah. But that was impossible. This photo was taken before she was even born. Agnes followed my gaze. Her eyes softened slightly, then hardened again. She turned the photo face down. "Memories fade," she said. "Best to let them." I knew where I had to start. The official record. The place where the truth, or at least the official version of it, was buried under layers of dust and bureaucracy. The sheriff's office was located in the small town hall building. One deputy sat at a desk, looking bored. He pointed me toward a back room when I asked about the old disappearance cases. "Chief Brody handles all that. He's retired but keeps the files. Still lives in town, down on Maple Street." Chief Brody's house was small, neat. He was surprisingly willing to see me. A stout man in his late 60s, with kind eyes. But the weight of decades sat heavy on his shoulders. I explained I was a journalist researching the disappearances from the 80s and 90s. I watched his face close off, the kindness in his eyes dimmed, replaced by familiar caution. "Tough subject, son," he said, stirring his tea. 20 years on, nothing new ever turned up. "That's exactly why I'm interested, Chief. Cold cases. Sometimes a fresh look." He sighed. There wasn't much to look at, truth be told. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just gone. 5 people in 15 years, always between ages 4 and 8, always taken from yards or just outside their homes. Any suspects? Hundreds interviewed, everyone ruled out. No connections, no patterns, except where they were taken from. Always close to the woods, always within a half-mile of the hollow. He gestured to a large stack of boxes in the corner. "The files are all there. Everything we had. You can look through them. But I warn you, it's frustrating reading." I spent hours going through the boxes. Police reports, witness statements, missing person flyers, the details blurred. Desperate parents, fruitless searches, the same phrase repeated. No trace found. But I started noticing things. Small inconsistencies. A witness claimed to have seen a tall shadow near the trees, dismissed as imagination. A footprint that didn't match any known shoes, found near a fence line, marked as inconclusive. One report mentioned a strange smell in the air the day after one disappearance, like ozone and wet soil. And the names: Emily Carter, David Jenkins, Sarah Hayes. My sister's file. Seeing her name on the official form was like a punch to the gut. Then I found it tucked inside Sarah's file. A single faded piece of paper. Not an official report. It looked like a handwritten note from the first officer on the scene. It described the family dog, Buster. Usually friendly, but that day, the dog was found hiding under the porch, trembling uncontrollably, wouldn't come out, wouldn't eat, acted like it had seen something terrifying. Not a bear, not a person, something that left no scent. No scent. Most predators leave a scent. Most humans leave a scent. What leaves no scent? I found a small cafe downtown, the Pine Cone Diner. It was the closest thing Silent Hollow had to a community hub. I sat at the counter, ordered coffee, tried to look unobtrusive. I started by talking generally about the town, the history. The owner, Brendan, was friendly enough, but her answers were short, guarded. Mentioning the disappearances felt like dropping a stone into still water. Finally, I worked up the courage. I asked Brendan directly about the cases. She stopped wiping the counter, her eyes fixed on the coffee machine. "That was a long time ago, honey. A terrible time. Broke this town's heart. Did anyone ever have theories, besides the official ones?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Folks talk, whispers, mostly about the hollow." "The hollow?" "That patch of woods back behind the ridge. Darkest part, oldest trees. Some say things live in there that shouldn't. Things from before the town was even here." "Things?" "Spirits," she said, but she didn't sound like she meant ghosts of the dead. Or worse, things that get lonely, things that want company. Her eyes darted toward the window, toward the dark line of the forest. "My grandma used to tell stories about the old ones who made deals with the woods, gave up something to keep the peace." "Gave up what?" Brenda shrugged nervously. She never said exactly, just a price, for the quiet, for the trees not to watch you. She straightened up abruptly. "It's just old stories though, superstition." As I left, I saw an older man sitting alone at a table. He'd been listening. Outside, I turned. He was still watching me. His face was grim. He raised a hand slowly, then pointed one finger toward the woods. A clear message: stay away. The library was a small brick building near the town square. It was run by a meticulous woman, named Eleanor. She was initially hesitant when I started asking for old town records, local history books, anything about the original settlers or the geography of the area. "Most of that's in the archives," she said. "Downstairs. It's not really open to the public. There was water damage years ago." I persisted. Finally, she relented. "All right, but don't touch anything fragile, and mind the dust." The archives were in the basement. The air was thick with the smell of damp paper and mildew. I spent hours going through brittle newspaper clippings about the town's founding, reports of local events, land deeds. Then I found a series of articles from the late 1920s describing a peculiar sickness that affected several families living near the woods. Not a physical illness, more like a wasting away of identity. People would forget their names, their families. They'd wander toward the woods, talking to themselves in languages no one understood. Buried beneath a stack of old property tax records, I found a small, leather-bound book. It wasn't catalogued. It looked like a personal journal. The handwriting was spidery, difficult to read. The first entry was dated 1931. It belonged to a woman named Ella Vance. She lived on a farm bordering the woods. Her early entries were typical farm life. Weather, crops, neighbors. But then the tone shifted. Mentions of strange sounds at night, shadows moving at the edge of her vision, the unsettling feeling of being watched. The entries became more frantic. She wrote of dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams, where she was lost in a maze of pine needles, and a voice, soft but everywhere, called her name. It promised her things, knowledge, peace, if only she would offer remembrance. Then came the most chilling part, an entry dated later that same year. "They took Thomas today," she wrote. Thomas was her young son, just like they took the Miller girl last month. It isn't an animal, it's them, the things from the deep woods. They hunger, not for flesh, for what we are, our names, our stories. They steal the threads that tie us to ourselves, to each other. Ilara wrote about the town's reaction. Not panic, a strange, resigned acceptance. The old families, she called them, seemed to know something. They didn't search too hard in the woods. They spoke of appeasement, of recognizing the claim. The journal entries became more erratic. Fragmented thoughts. Ilara described seeing figures in the woods, mimicking her loved ones. Her last few entries were almost unreadable. Words repeated, names scrambled. The final entry was just one line. "I go to join them. They promised I will remember him there." The Blackwood house stood on a hill overlooking the town. It was imposing, surrounded by ancient oak and pine trees. A woman answered the door. She was middle-aged, with sharp features, dressed in dark, expensive clothes. Her expression was cool, unwelcoming. "Miss Blackwood, my name is Ethan Hayes. I'm a journalist researching the town's history, specifically the disappearances." Her eyes narrowed. "We have nothing to say about that. I understand it's difficult, but I've found some old records, references to local beliefs about the woods, about something called the Hollow." At the mention of the Hollow, something shifted in her eyes. Fear, recognition. Those are just old stories, superstition. Ilara Vance's journal didn't sound like superstition, I said. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "You found that?" she breathed. "It was in the library archives." She wrote about the disappearances, about something taking people's memories, about the old families knowing things. Miss Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, urgent. "You need to leave this alone, Mr. Hayes. Some things are better left buried. My sister was taken, Sarah Hayes, 20 years ago. I can't leave it alone." Her face softened for just a second, a flicker of pity. Then it was gone. "You think you know grief. You don't know the half of it. Not what this place demands. Not what happens when you don't respect the balance." "What balance?" There are forces older than humanity in this world, Mr. Hayes. Forces that have their own claims, their own hungers. Sometimes you have to give something to protect what little you have left. You're talking about the missing people. You're saying you knew. She flinched. It isn't that simple. It's a terrible, awful thing. But opening that door, digging it all up, you don't know what you'll unleash. Just go, Mr. Hayes, she pleaded softly, before it takes you to. She closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch in the oppressive silence. I couldn't stop now. The truth about Sarah, about all of them, was tangled up in this dark secret, and the key was in the woods, in the hollow. I changed into sturdier clothes, packed a small bag, water, a flashlight, my recorder, and Alara Vance's journal. Stepping onto the first trail felt like crossing a threshold. The light diminished almost immediately. The trees were dense, ancient, their branches intertwined overhead, blocking out the sky. The further I walked, the quieter it became. The bird song faded. The wind seemed to die down. Only my own footsteps and breathing broke the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I tried recording my observations, but when I played it back, the sound was distorted. My voice sounded shaky, distant, and beneath it, a faint, unnatural whisper, a low murmur, just below the threshold of understanding. As I walked, I found myself struggling to remember small things. What was the name of the deputy I spoke to? Did I lock my car? These weren't crucial memories, but the effort it took to recall them was unsettling. It felt like static in my brain. Then, through a break in the trees ahead, I saw it, a patch of brighter light, a clearing. It wasn't large, maybe 20 feet across. The ground wasn't covered in pine needles like the rest of the forest floor. It was just dark, bare earth. And in the center, 3 large, moss-covered stones arranged in a triangle. The clearing felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. There were no insects buzzing, no birds. The wind didn't stir the few dead leaves scattered on the bare earth. It was a pocket of unnatural stillness within the living forest. I opened Alara Vance's journal, found the passage about the clearing. She described it as the threshold, the place where the barrier between their world and ours was thinnest. The stones were marks of their claim. As I read, I felt that static feeling in my mind return, stronger this time. Brief flickers of confusion. It was starting. Something was here, and it was already touching me. The air around me grew heavy. A low hum returned, emanating from the stones. Whispering started. This time, it was closer, right at the edge of my hearing. Then I heard it, clearer this time. A single word, my name, Ethan, followed by another, Sarah. My blood ran cold. It knew my name. It knew her name. It had been listening since I arrived. The whispers intensified, becoming a cacophony of soundless voices in my head. They weren't speaking words I understood, but they were conveying concepts, ancient alien thoughts. They spoke of time differently, of life as a fleeting spark, of memory as a kind of sustenance. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, a sense of vertigo. The clearing seemed to warp around me. The trees felt like they were swirling. This wasn't a creature I could fight. It was a force, a presence. It was trying to overwrite me, to erase me. I scrambled backward, clutching the journal and Sarah's photo. Alara's words came back to me. She wrote about resistance, how the entity couldn't simply take. It needed to be given something. But she also wrote about smaller resistances, things that seemed to deter it. They hate names, I read from her journal. They feed on the loss of them. To speak a name clearly, with love or anger or fear, it is like fire to them. It asserts the boundary. Names, Sarah, my parents, my own name, Ethan. These were anchors, threads connecting me to my past, to my family, to myself. I clutched the photo of Sarah. I looked at her face. Her name, Sarah. I repeated it in my mind. Sarah Hayes. The whispers seemed to recoil slightly. The thrumming seemed to falter. I repeated my parents' names, my own name. Ethan. I wasn't giving in. I wouldn't let them erase her, or me. The climax wasn't a fight with claws and teeth. It was a battle in the mind, a struggle for identity, for remembrance. The entity was trying to unravel me, thread by thread, and I was fighting back with the simple, powerful act of remembering, of naming. The entity hammered at my mind, showed me fleeting, horrific images, whispered promises of peace if I would just let go, stop remembering, stop fighting. But every time it showed me a distorted memory, I countered with a true one. Her laugh, the way she squinted in the sun, the small scar on her knee. Gradually, the pressure began to recede. The whispers lessened, not because I had defeated it, but because I had refused to be easily consumed. I had proven to be difficult prey. The act of fighting back had solidified the threads, made them less appealing, perhaps. I pushed myself up, shaking. The woods still felt heavy, watchful, but the immediate aggressive assault had stopped. It hadn't given up. It was just waiting, observing. It knew where my anchors were. It knew my name, and it knew Sarah's. I stumbled out of the woods hours later, disoriented, exhausted, covered in dirt and scratches. The transition from the oppressive darkness of the forest back to the regular light of day felt jarring, like returning from another dimension. Back at the motel, Agnes was at the counter. She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly at my disheveled state. She didn't ask what happened, just nodded slowly. "The woods show you things," she said quietly. She knew. They all knew, and they chose to live with it. I had the journal. I had my notes. I had my terrifying personal experience in the hollow. I had found the truth. But what was the truth? That an ancient non-physical entity in the woods steals memories and identity, that it takes people as some form of sustenance, that an entire town lives in fear, complicit in a horrifying protocol to survive. I couldn't write the cold case feature I'd originally planned, not with this truth. Who would believe me? And publishing something this raw, exposing the town's secret, would it just provoke the entity further? I also knew the entity had touched me. It knew my name. It had tasted my remembrance. I could still feel that faint static in my mind sometimes, small moments of disorientation, a name briefly forgotten, a memory feeling slightly out of focus. I packed my bag. I left the Hollow Inn early the next morning. Agnes was at the counter again. I handed her the key. She didn't ask if my research was successful. She just looked me in the eye. "Safe travels, son," she said softly. Her gaze lingered on my face, as if she could see the shadow that had settled there. I drove away from Silent Hollow. The trees seemed to watch me go. The air felt a little lighter the further I got, but the silence I carried within me was heavier than before. I still have the journal. I still have the photo of Sarah, and I still hear the whispers sometimes, just at the edge of hearing, especially when I'm tired or stressed. They call my name, and sometimes they call hers. I never found Sarah's body. I never found her physical trace, because the hollow didn't take flesh. It took remembrance, and the terrible truth is, a part of my own remembrance is now tied to that place. A price was paid, not just by the missing, but by me, for opening the door, for listening to the pines. The town of Silent Hollow is still there, quiet, isolated, and the woods still remember, and sometimes, I think, they still hunger. What are your thoughts on the mysteries of Silent Hollow? Have you ever felt like a place held on to its secrets too tightly? Share your own experiences or theories in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, please give it a like, and remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the darkness. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay safe and be careful what you remember.